What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Walkout Network. It's your man, Ant Walker, here with another edition of Unleash, the weekly panel discussion show. So, of course, got to introduce the special guest on the panel. He's hell of a guy. You've seen him on Cageside Press. He is the MMA Soldier. He is Rodney James. Rodney, how you feeling, my man?
Rodney James, the rock star Edgar. Never better, my man. Never better. How are you? And thank you once again, man, for bringing me on as a guest. I love you guys. Had a lot of fun last time.
Oh, yeah. It's always a pleasure chatting with you, man. So, unfortunately, I won't be in Vegas. And normally the Vegas trips, we always spend a little time together. But next time, beer's on me, man.
Yeah, hopefully March. And, make sure, I'll make sure to play this audio in case, you try to come up short on that.
I will make an excuse at some point later in the show, and you can play that audio as well. Now, yes. So of course we've got the senior editor of Sherdog.com. He's the jack of all trades, who's mastered them all. Mr. Ben Duffy. Ben, how are you feeling, my man?
I am not feeling so hot. I am a Houstonian, and of course I have the obligatory allegiance to people shaking their heads already. I mean, I went to lunch with my wife. And when I got up to leave, it was 21-0 Texans in the first quarter, and Andy Reid was roughly the color of his warm-up jacket. Went, did some errands, got home, and I said, what the actual fuck happened while I wasn't looking? So, at any rate, Texans are out, and that it's just going to complete the whole cycle of the Houston teams getting to the medal podium in their respective sports, but shit in the bed before they win it all. That's the story of 2019-2020.
Or after winning it all and then getting bagged for that whole baseball thing. But
It's a rough week in Houston.
Yeah,
it's a good day to be in the MMA media in Houston. Plenty of stuff to talk about that's not involved with the local team sports.
Then I would suggest you just kick back, sip some lean, listen to some Devin the Dude, and it's all good. All right.
Oh, man.
So now, of course, got to introduce the man with the numbers, the statistician, the mathematical wizard, also Sherdog.com, my man, Jay Petrie. Jay, how you feeling today, brother?
As a Patriots fan that got knocked out in the opening round of the playoffs,
I've come
to terms with it. I'm good with that. I'm good not having a dog in the race. To sit back and watch what's going on. And some of that football, I don't know what's happening in the playoffs, and I like it. I like the chaos. But speaking of, no, I can't, there's no good transition there. Stat of the week. Stat of the week is 28. There will be a 28-day gap between the UFC South Korea card and UFC 246 upcoming this weekend. 28 days, 4 weeks. It's the longest span of events without a UFC card since way back in 2017 with a Mexico and a Netherlands card. So it's been a long layoff.
Yeah, it feels kind of strange to go this long without the UFC. There has been other mixed martial arts available, but there's been some boxing also. So we haven't been in a total desert for combat sports, but things feel different when the UFC is not in town. Of course, that's going to change in a big way this week. All right, so let's go on to the first topic of the day, and that is USADA. Jessica Penne claimed that USADA retired her by issuing a 4-year ban for microscopic levels of a steroid that allegedly came from tainted supplements. Why was she given a lengthy ban while fighters like John Jones and Sean O'Malley got off with shorter suspensions? Rodney, I'll start with you.
Well, the short answer is if Conor McGregor pissed hot for cocaine and steroids and who knows what else, dick pills and everything else tomorrow, then I guarantee you that fight would still go on, and I guarantee you we wouldn't see him. We wouldn't see the commission make an example out of him in terms of punishment. USADA is just inconsistent. I love this question because it's definitely something that needs to be discussed. And yeah, when you name those other names that especially like John Jones, a big name, and Sean O'Malley, of course, being the up and comer that they're really trying to get behind. I was just as confused as anybody else, and it's not because I'm not some goody that's sitting here thinking that everybody's always doing the right thing, but at the same time, it definitely concerned me when I go, well, how come this what happened to it's just inconsistent at best. Whatever happened to this? Well, it's a mandatory 2 years. It don't matter what the reason is. Tainted supplement, be damned, whatever it is. And then all of a sudden it's like 4 years. To my knowledge, you guys help me out. Has she ever had a positive test before?
Yes.
I thought, okay, so she's had one. So then I guess the mandatory minimum technically for a second time is the 4 years. But again, we don't see that with the bigger draws now, do we?
No, we don't. We don't. And it brings about some interesting contrast right there. Like you kind of alluded to it. I mean, John Jones, they moved an entire event for, and they re-examined the science itself to preserve the integrity of John Jones still fighting. Sean O'Malley had his own T-shirt ahead of one of his fights, so you definitely see where the promotional muscle swings. And Jessica Penne is someone who is firmly on the outskirts of that goodwill from the business side of the UFC. So I mean, I think that begs a bigger question here that we're going to ask, and I'll start with you on this one, Jay. Do you feel like USADA is actually doing a good job of cleaning up the sport?
If they're going to handle the drug testing and the sentencing and the way they're operating, the agency is operating lately, it's not going really so well for me. And Rodney hit it for me too. It's the inconsistency of how the rules are applied, how the sanctions are levied, cooperation and all the different evidence and information to bring it back. I mean, yeah, Sean O'Malley, this is his second test positive for Ostarine. Ostarine's a steroid. It's not a common household something. And he got flagged for it. And yes, they were able to review, okay, maybe tainted supplements, but they pled it down to 6 months again. Now, Jessica Penne had identical levels, give or take, of John Jones and his little micrograms. I'm not going to say the secret word, but the point is that she had a very similar situation to other fighters in the past and got slapped with a 4-year suspension on her second pop. And if what she alleges is true, tainted supplement, we saw her manager post a statement saying, here's the lab sending an unopened bottle of this substance that was tainted with stanozolone or whatever the steroid was. It boils down to that she doesn't have somebody speaking up for her, a Dana to lobby on behalf of her. And that hurts the sport, I think, because USADA at the end of the day is paid by the UFC. It's not an independent agency. As much we wish it would be, as much as I personally think it would be. When commissions, you love them or you hate them, commissions at least have that outside perspective. They're not beholden to the promotion, to so to speak. Personally, I think USADA, if they're going to be in the business of drug testing with the UFC, they should be involved in the testing and the process that goes into that. When it goes to punishment and sanction, I think that should be left to the independent agencies.
All right, Ben. Are you in agreement with Jay's assessment of USADA's performance, or kind of the question surrounding their place in the UFC?
In my opinion, it kind of boils down to semantics and your choice of words. I mean, the question that's literally in front of us is USADA doing a good job cleaning up the sport? If we want to define cleaning up the sport as reducing the incidence of fighters using banned substances in or out of competition, obviously nobody knows for a fact, but my strong feeling is that they probably have. I believe the number of fighters cheating, taking things that they know they shouldn't knowingly, is probably lower than it was 5 years ago. However, what is the purpose of cleaning up the sport? There's no purpose other than to present to the public and current and prospective athletes the facade of a respectable organization that is interested in a fair and level playing field. And because of that, even if the overall drug use is down, their lack of transparency, their capricious and frankly unfair decisions, the constant double standard, undermines the very reason they're supposedly cleaning up the sport, quote unquote. So while they may be reducing the amount of drug use going on, they're not doing the sport any favors. They're not doing the UFC any favors. They're not doing the fans any favors. It is number one bullshit.
That was a nice way to sneak number one bullshit in with such a serious face. But I think what I find more alarming about this is there's a GoFundMe page for Jessica Penne to state her case in front of this arbitration system. You know, we look at the people who have successfully fought against whatever sort of USADA sanctions were placed in front of them. John Jones obviously has quite a bit of money and is a star. Josh Barnett, you know, also someone who was on the higher pay scale in the UFC, and I think he complained about spending somewhere in the hundreds of thousands of dollars to fight his case and eventually be completely exonerated. And you know, obviously it broke his relationship with the UFC, and he's now a part of Bellator's roster. So when a Jessica Penne is pointed at as a steroid cheat, and they don't have the recourse to do it, at least something reasonable, at least that's sort of what bothers me about this. The policies itself seem to on the record or like on the books show consistency, but in practice it can't be if money is the true barrier to some sort of justice. So I you know, if I'm speaking out of turn on that one, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that seems to be the main deciding factor here.
No, I'm with you there. I think that the process of the appeal, the expense it takes, and everything that goes into it, and the time it takes to do all this and get the whole process resolved is just crazy. I mean, Jessica Penne tested positive in June last year, and USADA hasn't put a statement out. She had to come out and say, "Okay, here's the deal, man." It was kind of difficult, and then to read that and her to say that she doesn't have the money to afford it, the barrier to adjudicate to any sort of appeal process, any sort of response by the fighters is just, it's almost insurmountable for most fighters not named John Jones and Conor McGregor and Nate Diaz.
Unmute that, Ben.
I'm not muted. Can you guys not hear me?
Oh, yeah, we hear you now.
Oh, sorry. It's kind of the same dynamic that works in the criminal justice system or people fighting with their insurance companies, whether it's health or auto. Waiting and delaying favors the powerful party in almost every case.
Yep.
And even more so when you're talking about a fighter who has a 5 to 10 year useful lifespan in competition. So just waiting by itself is unfair in itself, like unnecessary delay.
I think oh, go ahead, Rodney.
Well, as you mentioned earlier, J2, like it's not a situation like a John Jones, for example, where you have the president of the company who's basically, you know, speaking on your behalf. And this right here just goes back to a conversation that I've had many times, one I just had with an outspoken guy on the roster who's fighting at 246 and Justin Ledet, and that is the lack of a union. And it really bums me out. Hopefully we'll see that. That's a whole other conversation. I just wanted to make sure that we interject that because, moving forward, how do you correct that inconsistency if the UFC themselves not only fails to address it, but just outright denies that it even exists? So you have to have someone who's knowledgeable of the law and how you know the inner workings of business go in order to speak on their behalf. Because let's be honest, these fighters, most of them, they're athletes. They're not they're not lawyers.
Yeah. Right.
Well,
union dues would go a long way in paying for some of the legal fees to push this arbitration.
And just one little last thing, Amanda Ribas, another low on the totem pole fighter. She was suspended for 2 years for Osterine. Big surprise. She, after the process went through and whatever she needed to do and speak to whomever and go through the appeal and the retesting, she got her ban lifted 23 months into the suspension. So it took her team and the USADA or whomever was involved in that situation 23 months to figure out, oh, actually turns out she's okay. She didn't, this was the contaminated supplement right here. Here's the testing. Here's the information. She actually, oh, my bad, 23 months out of a 24-month suspension.
Wow.
And she got 24 months. Everybody else got 6.
Wow, that's definitely the symptoms of a broken system there. So now, of course, we did talk in the intro about how long it's been between events for the UFC, and typically when that happens, people start getting a little nutty. Start seeing a lot of stupid stuff on MMA Twitter, a place that isn't exactly known for intelligent discourse in the first place. One of these bringers of low IQ standards comes by the name of Mike Perry, who decided it was a good time to just drop the dreaded N-word when discussing an African American celebrity by the name of Michael Jai White. By the way, Michael Jai White's very nice guy. Very nice guy. I met him a couple times. Great dude. But anyway, this isn't the first time that Perry has used such colorful language. Not the first time that he's been at the center of some sort of controversy like this. Now, the UFC has been pretty silent about this, and now we have to ask, is it time for the promotion to reevaluate its relationship with Mike Perry? And Rodney, I know you put out an excellent piece talking about this on Cageside Press, so I'd like to give you the floor to address this first.
Thank you. Thanks for the plug. I have a few that we'll probably do throughout this conversation on some of your other questions. But yeah, please go to Cageside Press and read that article that I wrote, because I really was speaking from the heart. I'm very passionate about this issue, and I think that it came across really well. Sometimes I'll write something, and we all do, and you go back and go, oh well, I was on a deadline and I was hurried, whatever. It's not the best thing, but this was something I was really proud of, because not only did I feel like it came across well and I articulated what I wanted to say, but I felt like, everybody else, at least that's a white dude, seems to be kind of just afraid to go ahead and jump out and tackle this, because, and Anthony and I had a private conversation about it online, where he said, look, he's like, thank you, because, it's like when I do it, when a black guy does it, then people say, oh, you're just race baiting, or you're just, well, whatever. And I see that. I believe him, because I see that happen all the time on his Twitter feed. I see fans accuse him of that, and I don't think that's the case. If I did, I would say something, because there are people who do that, and I don't think that's cool either. So, to the issue at hand, as you alluded to, we have seen him do it before. There was, of course, this ridiculous video in which he said, hey, I did a DNA test and the results came back, and I was 2% African, so I can legally say the word, and we all know what the word is, but it's like, okay, but if anything, that's racially insensitive, and we know it's not. I don't think it comes from a place of malice or racism with Mike Perry, because he's just a guy who he's trying to embrace a culture that, yeah, he probably is also embraced by in certain circles, maybe with his friends, based on where he grew up in Flint, Michigan, based on where he lives in South Florida and stuff like that. But what you have to understand, and Rashad Evans said this better than I've ever heard it said before. He said, look, he was on Adam Hunter's show, another buddy of mine, MMA Roasted podcast. He said, look, just because you have a pass, it is not universal. Okay, so your friends that you hang out with, it might be okay, and they might not mind because they know you and they understand it's not a big deal. But when you get in a public forum and now you're saying it, that's a whole different implication. So to answer the question, Tyron Woodley's a guy who said a few years ago, that the UFC has some racism going on behind the scenes, but he never really gave us any good examples, and the examples that he did give weren't that strong, I felt, and I talked to his coach, Dean, about it, and, it is what it is. But who knows what he's really talking about behind the scenes. I think this highlights an example of, again, cultural insensitivity, and it's just being passed on as if it's not a big problem. In the article, I stated, I'm paraphrasing here, but I said something to the effect of, if someone says a homophobic slur, even if they don't mean it directed towards a homosexual, if they just made it in the slang version of the word fag or whatever the case may be, the outrage that comes from the LGBTQ, RST, WXY, whatever the hell the acronym is now. Sorry, I can't keep up, but the honest truth is, they get offended. There's tremendous outrage. They band together, and then the UFC does something about it. But are they doing something because they morally feel an obligation to it, or because they're pandering to that outrage and trying to counter it, and they're being reactive? So in this case, we're seeing that that's not happening. They're not reacting to it because there hasn't been any outrage of any kind, save for a handful of folks in the MMA media, like Matthew Wells, like Anthony Walker, or UFC fighters like Angela Hill. And then it's kind of like, okay, so we've established that there is a standard of conduct when it comes to homosexuals. I got it. I agree with that. It's correct. Nobody should be, saying offensive things to them and making them feel shitty or bullying them or whatever the case may be. But Black people are historically some of the most downtrodden, the most quote unquote expendable, or treated like expendable people in this country, but yet they don't seem to be protected. The company's silence, and to quote Matt Wells, is deafening in this situation. Do I think that, again, Mike Perry's a racist? No. Do I think Dana White is? No, absolutely not. But I think it's just kind of one of those deals where it's like, well, tough shit. You don't like it? Suck it up. Should they reevaluate their relationship? I think he's a guy who's entertaining. They like him because he fights to finish, kill or be killed style. But he's also got, he hasn't looked so great. He's got a few losses. And then, of course, this is not the first time that we've had this conversation. And I'm trying to stimulate it because, as anybody who follows me knows, I am the antithesis of a social justice warrior. But I also believe in accountability, and right is right and wrong is wrong. And if I'm wrong, by all means, hold me accountable. In this situation, I feel Perry should be held accountable as well. Does that mean kicking him off the roster? I don't know, but something should happen. Something more than nothing.
Jay, Ben, any thoughts to what you think the UFC should do about the Mike Perry situation, if anything?
I think at the very least, as a test case for what kind of speech is acceptable when you are publicly representing the company, because if you're a fighter if you are an independent contractor in the UFC, part of your job is to sell your own fights, for better or for worse. That is the way it is. So your Twitter, you're at work. When you're tweeting, you're at work for the UFC. And independent contractor or not, if an Uber driver called another Uber driver the M word on Twitter, he'd probably be toast. I'm an independent contractor. I assure you that if I use that term on Twitter, I would be gone. And the thing that's unfortunate is the UFC is going to miss a fairly low-cost chance to look moral and ethical here. I'm never going to accuse them of being moral and ethical. They are clearly driven by the profit motive. But he's a guy that competitively is already kind of on his way out. And they could censure him now. They don't even have to fire him. But at least stop pretending that they're not aware that it's going on. And he could be one bad loss away from out anyway, but their silence is definitely deafening. And it's unfortunate because his entire UFC run is going to be defined by being an exciting action fighter who was never really a solid top 10 guy and was just an unbridled vehicle of racism the whole time. And I don't think he's overtly racist either. I don't think he sits there and contemplates 19th century racial science and decides which races are better. But what was his first big splash in the UFC? It was beating Hung Yu Lim and his cornerman, Alex Nicholson, taking some time off from being the Western Hemisphere's largest stockpile of illegal testosterone, making a racial remark about him that they all thought was really funny. It's the train that he's ridden the entire time, and he's going to be in and out of the UFC without it ever really being a big deal. The message that will be sent is, as long as you can put some butts in seats, sell a few pay-per-views, get a few eyeballs on the free undercard, you can be as repulsive as you want, and the UFC will say nothing about it.
That's good.
Man, he's a grown man. He's almost 30. So that, I know age on the council here is a little above 30, but the point is, he's a 30-year-old dude. it's not a goof. It's not a joke. If you're going to give him the utmost benefit of the doubt, work with me here, is that he's trying to get his name in the news again and knows it's a hot button issue that would incite people and get him to go, God, I can't wait to watch him get knocked out. But do we really think he plans that far ahead? No, I just think he's a knucklehead. I mean, and that's whether he's racist or not. I don't think that should really factor in because he keeps dropping the N-word. If I did that, I would be called a racist, and rightfully so. Why would he get a pass because of anything other than I don't know. I don't see him as a draw. I don't see him as anything of a fan favorite to speak of. I don't. Has he ever headlined an event? I don't think so. He's just another guy with heavy hands that has a big mouth, and he's dumb. It's not. There's nothing that the UFC will really gain by leaving him on the roster, and saying nothing is the worst thing they can do. And UFC just has not addressed the issue at all, and it's very clear. I mean, take it for what it's worth, but the UFC code of conduct for its athletes, it's right there of speaking, racially insensitive remarks and everything like that. It's not a question mark. We're 2020 now. Do we really have to ask if you can't say racial slurs anymore? I don't know. I'm over it. I'm over Mike Perry. I don't see any. I wouldn't quite go so far as to say if he were cut, nothing of value be lost. But really, when you look at Mike Perry and what he's delivered to the scene, I'm over it. I'm over Mike Perry.
I think that's a fair way to put it. So I'll
Okay, everybody, take cover. Take cover. all the white have spoken.
I'll contain myself as much as possible here. I'm not sure if Mike Perry is a racist or not, but I'm sure he's a fucking idiot. That I can absolutely say without a shadow of a doubt. Mike Perry's a fucking idiot. Now, what I have a really a big problem with here is this on his part, these lines of inconsistency, while this overall narrative that he's not a racist or whatever. Now, he initially, like as Rodney said, the 2%. He's 2% African or 2% black or whatever, and he can say the word. Yeah, that's really flawed reasoning, first of all. But I mean, 2% black, 98% fool, as I said on Twitter. But he then, after saying what he said to Michael Jai White, then doubles down on it. Then calling him, then saying, "Oh, well, it hurts worse because a white guy said it to you because you're acting like one." Now, before anyone jumps out there and says, "Well, he said it with an A instead of an ER," one thing I can't stand about this conversation is that always it pivots to, okay, rappers say it and black people say it to each other. So why can't we? If you really want to say the N-word that bad, I dare you, take your motherfucking chances out here in these streets and say it. I dare you, motherfucker. Take it out there. If anybody listening and watching right now decides that I'm a white guy and I really want to say the N-word so bad because I heard Tupac say it, please, 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 please go up to the biggest black dude you find out there in the street that you don't know and say it to him and see what happens to you. Best of luck. Best of luck to you. Okay? Like make no mistakes about it. Like if you got a pass from your friends or your crowd, whatever, as Rashad Evans said, keep it there, because I dare you to say that shit elsewhere. And without saying too much about this, I've had an incident or two about this, and bless believe it was handled. History can repeat itself, so watch your mouths out there, straight up and down. As far as what the UFC should do with him, I don't know. I mean, we've seen them react to when Miguel Torres had the rape van tweet. They
fired him.
Yeah, they fired him. They brought him back, but they fired him back. Then I think Rodney, I think you mentioned this in your article too about the comments that Matt Mitchell made about Fallon Fox. There, even if they were surface level punishments that didn't actually amount to anything, it was something. It was some sort of public display to say, hey, this is unacceptable, and drawing the line somewhere. I want to see something like that, just something, just anything, because and I don't even want the promotion to hide behind the whole independent contractor thing, because that was my initial thought was, okay, maybe they're steering clear of this because of the code of conduct that is seldomly enforced these days. Maybe. But I think it is a fair line in the sand to draw racial slurs among your independent contractors. Just seems like a very, very narrow, low bar. Just the lowest bar, the lowest common denominator that I think most people can agree upon. But I also was reminded of something on a lighter note. So there was Ben, do you remember the time there was some troll that was mad about something that I wrote? I think it was something related to racism or something in that nature. And I told the guy to go fuck himself. And he tried to get me fired because he thought "go fuck yourself" was a homophobic slur.
Yep, I remember it very well.
To that gentleman, I say, "Go fuck yourself." All right. So, to the "I'm not surprised, Mr. Falcons" moment. This is the greatest title in all of media history. So let's pay homage to Jay Petrie for his creativity. Now, Jay, since you did name the segment, you get the honors. What is your "I'm not surprised, Mr. Falcons" moment this week?
So we took a minute to get off of drugs and yell about Mike Perry because he's an idiot. Let's go back to drugs for a second, if you don't mind. So yeah. So a UFC fighter named Townsend got flagged recently by USADA in competition tests for recreational substances, cocaine and fentanyl. So we've had fighters in the past pop for cocaine. Jones got flagged, but they didn't test for it in competition, so that was a thing. Melvin Gillard, Brad Scott, Desmond Green, he had a bunch of blow with him when he got in that accident and killed people. Look it up. But fentanyl? That's no joke, man. I don't think we've had a fighter run into that before. Both were banned, or both obviously are banned in competition. You can party if you don't have a fight schedule and you're not up to fight week. You can party with that stuff, so good luck. He was up for a 2-year suspension, but you know what happened? They pled it down to 6 months. 6 month suspension for cocaine and fentanyl on fight week by explaining to the commission and the USADA and whomever it did not affect my performance. Ultimately, he lost. He got knocked out by Dalton Champion in the 3rd round. It was a pretty good fight.
Sound like it did affect his performance.
But he was able to plead his sentence down by somehow proving, and I wish I could see or be a fly on the wall of how that went down, to say, no, fentanyl didn't affect me in any way. Timeout. What? You're that hardcore? Dude's fighting in 2 weeks, by the way. He's fighting at the end of January. I popped for that stuff in June. Far be it for me to pass judgment, but if you're rocking fentanyl on the week of your fight, which is a heavy-duty narcotic, maybe you should take some time, get your house in order, come back. We'll be here. We'll be ready for you. But yeah. So yeah, fentanyl, UFC, party on.
Yeah. Just to put this in context, my wife just gave birth a couple of weeks ago, and fentanyl was in the epidural. So
yeah,
that's
an anesthetic or a major league pain reducer and party starter.
Yeah, not much of a. Yeah, that's not a fun drug. I would say. Well, that was bizarre. Ben, can you please share your "I'm not surprised, Mr. Falcons" moment this week?
Well, I was both surprised and not surprised in the lead up to UFC 246 that Conor McGregor appeared on Ariel Helwani show. And I was surprised, pleasantly, that Helwani asked Cerrone at all about his 2 pending sexual assault allegations. I mean, it's impossible to talk to Conor McGregor ahead of a fight this weekend, first time in 15 months, without talking about what he's been doing in the last 15 months, which is almost uniformly negative and lawless. But so I was pleasantly surprised that Helwani brought it up at all. I was unpleasantly surprised / not surprised that he just like wrapped it in cotton and bubble wrap and powdered sugar and just kind of rolled it gently towards him. And it's a bummer because he literally could not even bring himself to use actual descriptors for the accusations. He just vaguely referred to it as things you've been accused of that we won't name, which is a complete fucking cop-out, one. And beyond just a cop-out, it's not a har-har, wink-wink, nudge-nudge. When McGregor fights, millions of eyes come to this that are not embedded in the MMA media space from week to week, month to month, unless he's about to fight. So there might be people who will see clips of that interview that don't actually know what Helwani's talking about or don't know about it in any sort of detail. So not only was it kind of cowardly in a vacuum, it was actually harmful in the real world. And the thing that sucks about it is this is a very smart, calculated move because this is right ahead of the media obligations of Fight Week. And now they can plausibly say, well, he's already answered those questions. There's no need to revisit that. And it kind of shuts down any conversation before it even begins in just the most absolute softball way possible. It's really unfortunate. And it is par for the course for the UFC, their chosen broadcast partner, and its main personalities. And I feel bad saying that, but it sucks. It's a disservice to all of us. And I am both surprised and not surprised.
Well, Ben, excellent points you bring up, and we definitely will dive deep into that in just a little bit. So hold those thoughts. I know you were just kind of scratching the surface there. Rodney, can you share with us your "I'm not surprised, Mr. Falcons" moment for the week?
Well, boys, we are really on the same wavelength here because where Jay got the conversation started with drugs, I'm going to go ahead and talk about its favorite partner in crime, alcohol. Cheers, everybody. And when we get there, by piggybacking on where Ben just left off, because I tell you, and I can say this because I am not representing you and your show. I'm a guest, remember? So I'm representing MMA Soldier, and I'm representing Rodney James. So I remember seeing that interview and just thinking, imagine if a good interviewer actually was talking to Conor McGregor. Somebody like me instead of Helwani. Then we'll get to the bottom of this shit. But here's the deal. There was another thing that he talked about, which it did surprise me, was McGregor, which I'm not surprised by the answer, but I was surprised that he opened up about it. And he was talking about all his debauchery and his craziness and how he was like on this bender for the longest time where he was just partying. And he didn't really get into too much detail, but we kind of know there's a lot of it that's public. Quite frankly, his drunkenness, his brawling, his arrests, his this and that. There's certainly allegations of substance abuse, like I don't know, the kind that John Jones likes to use, and I'm not talking about the performance enhancing kind either in the bedroom or in the gym. I'm talking about the kind that you use when you're hanging out with strippers and a bunch of crazy people, which is pretty much Conor McGregor's company these days. And he said a lot of stuff though that was weird. Like he was talking about underground fight clubs that they were having and stuff when he was like completely loaded out of his mind, and he made a lot of mistakes. Well, clearly we know you made a lot of mistakes, and there's still some second and third order effects that we maybe haven't even seen the light of day. But the other thing too, because we know anytime he fights Proper 12, it's a big deal, and they put it on the octagon. They sponsor Conor McGregor. UFC gets that partnership with them, helps to build that brand. That's cool. Well, Donald Cerrone is getting a little of that same love from Budweiser, and I'll tell you, here in Las Vegas, Vegas, apparently, this is from Brett Okamoto. He posted that they have they have like a Budweiser can. It has Donald Cerrone on it, and then I guess like it's all the records he's broken in the UFC, like number of wins, fight night bonuses, knockouts. It's pretty cool. I don't know if it's all records, but it's like a lot of his accomplishments nonetheless. But I tell you, I'll be on the lookout for that first and foremost here in Las Vegas, even though I'm not a huge fan of Budweiser, but I might just have to have one for a souvenir because I love seeing any of these guys and gals when they're able to attain some kind of crossover success. I have to give a shout out to Baby Yoda. How do you not give a shout out to Gina Carano for being a part of the Star Wars universe? And she's a gal that made her name by being one of the pioneers of MMA. And then Ronda Rousey actually ended up, and rightly so, getting a lot of credit, but maybe Gina in the mainstream didn't quite get as much credit. So again, with Donald, he's a wild man outside of the cage. He's just as entertaining out of it as he is in the cage. And he backs it up. He's an awesome fighter. But yeah, I just thought that's really cool. Conor McGregor's got his little whiskey thing that he's doing, and it's okay. I drink it a lot. I love whiskey. I love Irish whiskey. I drink it. But yeah, it did surprise me a little bit to see a big heavyweight in the alcohol industry, in the beer industry, the king of beers, as they say, Budweiser, give Cerrone a little shine. And I liked it. I was pleasantly surprised.
Something I want to piggyback on that real quick. UFC and Bud and Budweiser and Bud Light and whatever, they broke up. Remember, the UFC is now the official beer sponsor with Modelo?
Modelo.
But I think
Modelo.
Modelo's parent company also owns Budweiser.
Oh, they're InBev? I didn't.
I think it's the same like overall conglomerate that owns it. It's sort of like Adidas.
True fan, you remember when Joe Rogan said, talk us through the Mickey's replay up on the screen.
Oh man, I remember Mickey's and they had the grenades. They called them grenades.
Yeah, I got a thing of Gordon beer like in my beer cellar, like aging and just ready for. I'm kidding.
It's not bad.
I think the Fertittas actually owned that shit.
Well, while we're on the lines of some of the merchandising surrounding UFC 246, I guess I'll take a soft. I'm not surprised, Mr. Falcons, when we talk about how ugly that damn Conor T-shirt is that Reebok put out. But the tennis shoes that are accompanying this, or whatever, the Conor Reeboks actually look pretty good. But that little action figure guy, the little character in the commercial, is the same character in that ugly ass shirt. So I just wanted to point that out. But my true I'm not surprised Mr. Falcons moment actually comes from myself. On my Twitter account, I put a poll up that said, what inspires more goofball behavior on MMA Twitter? And this was specifically because of Mike Perry, because of all the talk about Clarissa Shields fighting in MMA, and also just all the things that happen whenever we don't have a regular UFC event and people just start getting crazy. But surprisingly, Conor fighting won the poll at 55.2% of something that inspires the dumbest behavior on MMA Twitter, with boxing MMA crossovers coming in second at 21.6%, fighters dropping the N-bomb 13.8%, and fighters being homophobic 9.4%. So all things that inspire some of the worst out of the people who enjoy this sport. But while we're, we definitely we're gonna pivot back to Ben's, the subject of Ben's I'm not surprised Mr. Falcon's entry, talking about Conor McGregor's sexual assault allegations and what this means for UFC 246. So, now that we've had this, now granted, this interview came out after the questions were already made, but now that the questions have been here and Ariel Helwani's interview has been released, I think it's fair to ask this question in a different way. Now that we've seen that, should the MMA media still address Conor's sexual assault investigation? And Jay, I'll start with you.
I think they should, even if it's going to play out exactly how Duffy described it, where they can preempt it by they being the UFC or maybe Conor's manager and himself to say, well, we already answered this on a big official ESPN broadcast, so we don't need to deal with it now. It felt a lot of internet Twitter people, Twitter folk, or whatever they're called nowadays, were giving him a pat on the back, saying, "Good on you for asking the question." Yeah, I am 100% with Duffy. He didn't even say what it was. He didn't even, not necessarily define it, but even say sexual or attempted, any of those terms to define what actually happened. It was the allegations, those allegations type of things. It felt like the previous Conor McGregor, Ariel Helwani interview, where it was a PR platform to make Conor McGregor look like he's answered these questions. He's answered what he needed to answer and explain himself and his wild, crazy times, his whatever partying and his I was drinking on fight week and whatever. I didn't feel good when he answered the questions, and that was pretty significant. Time will tell, and time will reveal all. Dude, it's been since March. It's been over 9 months now that this has been going on in a major U.S. mainstream news outlet when the New York Times first posted the first allegation about it. There are some things he can't say legally, obviously. If he can't comment on an active investigation that he's a part of course. But unless he's been issued a gag order, and we know by the UFC or by a legal entity, there are things you can say. And the silence, as to rephrase what was used earlier, the silence is deafening. You'll find, time will reveal all. That's it. That's everything. That's everything that lumps together a chronicle of multiple alleged sexual assaults. Now, I'm a hardliner in this one because here's the thing. We've said it before, we said it again, and we're going to keep saying it. We're in the hurt business. One combatant will try and inflict bodily harm on the other. When someone that steps in the cage is under investigation for violent crimes, violent sexual crimes outside the cage, maybe we should time out. Maybe we should put a halt to their in-cage activity. Innocent until proven guilty is the courtroom. It isn't private business. It isn't public opinion. It isn't anything like that. It shouldn't be rewarded by an alleged $80 million payday. I think this is, I think I have a lot of thoughts on this, as you might know. It needs to be continually addressed, even if it's the same answer, even if the question needs to keep being asked.
Rodney, what would you like to add to this?
Here's what we'll do. Okay, everybody just calm down. We'll let John Morgan ask the question, okay? Because he's got a pass with the UFC. He can do whatever he wants. I'll tell you, it's not the kind of question that I would ask, simply because, I'll tell you, man, there was a really awesome interview that Nick Cannon did last week with Howard Stern. And if you guys, anybody that is listening, if you have the SiriusXM subscription and you have the app, go listen to that interview. Nick Cannon actually got accused. And there's this whole racket that exists where people, and it's like, it's usually, some type of criminal entity where they try to extort people by creating these false allegations and say, and I'm not saying that's the case here. I'm saying we just have to be careful. We have to tread lightly because we don't have enough information. That's all I'm saying. Now, if there was an indictment, if there was, even a charge or perhaps a guilty verdict that happens like later on down the road, is it the kind of question that I would ask? Yes, absolutely. Because then I feel like it's fair game. I feel like when you're getting ready for the fight, though, me personally, it's not something I would ask, but I'll tell you this. And this is the last thing I'll say. When I was at UFC 245 last month, it was, just feels like yesterday. It's the one that just happened here in Las Vegas. Colby Covington came out. When you had media day, you can get one-on-one time with almost everybody in that whole room, except Kamaru Usman. What they did was they bring them to the stage. You guys have seen it. They put them on the stage, and it's kind of more of a scrum round robin type format. You're not going to get one-on-one time. I've been covering this sport professionally since 2012. The first time I had credentials to an actual event was 2013, Weidman versus Silva. Okay, and I'm telling you, I have never seen this much media at an event, and we're talking about Covington versus Usman. These are not household names. Bubble. Who Conor McGregor is, your neighbor, everybody knows. So it's going to be the same thing. It's going to be a huge scrum surrounded around him. He's probably not going to be out there very long, as Ben said, this is the first time in I don't know how long that he's actually been available to the media on media day. Somebody will ask it, and it might not be John Morgan, but somebody I think will. But again, I think it's going to be ambiguous. I think we're not going to have any more information than we do now, and that's pretty much all I have to say about it. I agree with everything you guys have said, though, and for me personally, we just have to see how it plays out.
I think where I take the issue is that his availability is virtually zero. Like, he very clearly is calling the shots on who he will speak to in these situations. Talking to Oscar Willis with the Mac Life, had a good interview with him. The two with Ariel. Can you really think of other sit downs that Conor has had? Or just, I mean, just in terms of availability for the media, that the opportunity to ask these questions, it's hard to say. It's hard. It's kind of it's a difficult situation because, okay, you don't want to ask him this on fight week, but this is the only time we get to see him. You know, he's gone for the rest of the time. So if not now, then when, I think is why I'm more up in arms about it, because it's been so little coverage for the whole year. And we know nothing. We know nothing as media, and we're the ones who are supposed to know something, I think.
And I guarantee you, Ariel and of course, the Mac Life, which is basically his own, media outlet. I guarantee you, there were producers, there are people, there are all types of people from his entourage that call the shots, that were giving them copious notes and saying, "Hey, don't go here, don't go there." And people are going to adhere to that, because when you have the opportunity to speak to a world-renowned superstar, and listen, we get put in a very that's just an awkward position. I mean, you could wreck your career, and it's sad to say, but I mean, I know there's people who, that think you should hard charge sometimes with the really tough questions. Again, that's just one where personally I would tread lightly, just for that reason, not because I'm scared to be controversial or ask hardball questions, because that's actually two of my favorite things to do, is just be out of my comfort zone and to ask difficult questions, have difficult conversations. However, again, just there's not enough information to really, I can't point fingers. I can't say, well, we know this for sure. Like you said, Jay, we don't know a lot. We just know there's allegations. Are they founded? Are they not? I don't always trust the legal process. Trust me on this, I do not. But in this case, we just have to.
You know what? I feel like I'm kind of in the middle of what everyone is saying here. Now, one thing I don't want to kind of trash Helwani's interview with him so much, or the way he asked. I don't expect a whole lot out of ESPN in this situation, because they are a broadcast partner. They stand to make a boatload of money off of any McGregor fight. And even still, like, Helwani, I think he kind of did what he was supposed to do, supposed to ask, and not necessarily be abrasive just to be abrasive. I would have liked him to actually say sexual assault. I would have liked to hear those words, so that I can agree with. But here's the thing: it's up to McGregor to answer whatever he wants to answer. It's up to him to make himself available to whoever, whenever he feels, and that's his prerogative. It's his right to say, I don't feel like doing media day, or I will, or I only talk to this person or that person. His prerogative. That's fine. But it is the job of media to ask the question. And I don't give a damn if it's fight week. I don't give a damn if it's in the octagon after the fight. That is a very relevant thing to the fight itself. It is a very relevant thing to have, as you put it, Jay, like being in the hurt business and you're accused of hurting someone illegally, in a perverse sexual act. Yeah, that is something that is very relevant to the fight itself, and very relevant to doing our jobs properly, in my opinion. So I'm not sure who's going to jump on that sword. Somebody probably will, with the number of media there. And it's up to Conor to give whatever answer, whether we glean information from it or not. I don't think the idea that we're not going to get any additional information from the question means that we shouldn't ask the question. That's sort of where I stand on this. We'll ask it. Hey, say that your lawyer say you can't talk about it. That's fine, but the opportunity needs to be presented. So that's just my 2 cents on it.
Just real quick, you know, in my little blurb in the last segment, I talked about how this whole thing is being wrapped up in, you know, cotton balls, bubble wrap, and powdered sugar. I mean, even sexual assault is a euphemism. The victims in these cases are alleging that they have been raped.
Right.
Like actual involuntary sexual intercourse, penetration, the actual sex act. This was not like a groping. This was not somebody that got like, you know, the TV anchor that got like smacked on the ass and, you know, said that she'd been sexually assaulted. Like, even calling it sexual assault, as we are here, is euphemistic. It's putting a layer of cotton candy on the outside of this. And I understand if Conor McGregor can't answer questions because it's part of open investigations. He's not obligated to answer. We're obligated to ask. And if we can't ask him, we're obligated to ask the UFC, at what point did you know anything about these? And what made you confident booking this fight that he would even be a free person? What do you know? Like, I think it's unfortunate that McGregor and his handlers were allowed to manicure and manage the handling of this story by leading with another long form interview with Helwani, which, because of all the financial incentives involved, is tantamount to a press release.
And
when was the last
said,
time?
oh, sorry.
When was the last time Helwani pulled something out of somebody that they didn't want to say or didn't want to talk about?
Probably when he was on MMA Fighting on the MMA Hour by accident.
What decade was it?
Not this one.
And I'm not mad at Helwani. He's doing his job.
Yeah, fair point. Fair point. I definitely let me apologize too, because saying sexual assault, you're right, is totally euphemistic, and from the stories that we've seen, rape. Yes. And that is an ugly word, but if something ugly happened, we say the ugly word, accused of rape. So let's just put that one down. So, all right. So moving on to sort of the rest of what UFC 246 has to offer. Conor's fighting Cowboy Cerrone is a fan favorite. Vegas, all the media. Does it feel like a blockbuster card to anyone on the panel?
Overall, I would definitely say no. I mean, you know, listen, you could go with a stronger co-main event for sure. And this is not a knock on Holly Holm or Rocky Pennington, for that matter, who I've said is underrated, you know, for a long time. But we remember their first fight, you know, it wasn't the greatest fight. And stylistically, you can't really expect that fight to be that great anyway. And I think we'll see more of the same again. That being said, you know, when you have Conor McGregor, the UFC just knows it's sort of like Hollywood when they make a sequel to a movie that had, you know, made X amount of dollars. They know, okay, if we invest X amount of dollars into this movie, we know it's not going to be as good as the first one, but we know that we will make this amount of money, so we'll make a profit. So I think they've calculated this meticulously. They know, and of course, Conor's on there, so they've jacked up the pay-per-view price because they know people are going to pay for it. Overall, though, and this is where I get into one of my other plugs, I had James Lynch on Cageside Press on the YouTube, and we actually broke this card down, and we spent the most time talking about the undercard. So but when you ask, is UFC 246 a blockbuster, can't really include the prelims because, number one, a lot of those are names that only hardcore fans or analysts of the sport really know, and people will know these names, but they don't have drawing power yet, but they're definitely people you should tune in. So some of those people were given the opportunity to fight in the UFC as a result of this last season or previous seasons of the Contender Series, like Ode Osborne, who is also on Cageside Press YouTube and CagesidePress.com. You can check that out. Justin Ledette joined me, but he's actually not a Contender Series guy, but he's fighting an undefeated wrestler in Alexa Kamer. So that's another one that's worth it. I mean, Tim Elliott is fighting on this card. Awkward one himself. And then, of course, Maycee Barber, another Contender Series standout, another undefeated prospect. Lot of really good stuff happening on this undercard. And then for the main card itself, like I said, you got former champions and Holly Holm. Well, Conor, obviously, a lot of former champions. So blockbuster, will it make a lot of money? Yes. Will it be a lot of fun to be here in Las Vegas while all this pandemonium is going on and the crazy drunken Irish people are dancing in the streets? Win or lose? Yes, absolutely. Check on all accounts. But from top to bottom, I mean, if God forbid, don't kill me here if I jinx this, but if Conor or Cerrone doesn't make the walk, then this is a total bust. Sorry. I mean, as a hardcore fan, of course, I'm going to watch, but in terms of what they're expecting to generate in terms of revenue, you can't really rest it on anything else that's happening on this card besides that main event.
Yeah. So, Ben, I know you do a lot of deep dives. I know you, Jay. I know you do plenty of deep dives too. But is this a blockbuster card in your eyes?
It is certainly the least loaded Conor McGregor card I can think of since he became Conor McGregor and was headlining cards. It as Rodney said, I don't even need to rehash that because he did such a good job. But it has many delights for the hardcore fan. I'm surprised at how little they loaded it with easy cotton candy for the casual fan. They are just completely banking on his marketability in this. For the type of people that make Conor McGregor cards blockbusters, the kinds of buyers, he is the attraction. Pettis and Holm have a certain amount of name value, but he is carrying this one. And I was, doing radio and podcasts this time last week, and I was the guy saying, it's weird that there's no hype. Like, this doesn't feel like a Conor McGregor card. And everybody told me I was an idiot, and they were right. I was an idiot, and they said, just wait until fight week, and it'll all fall into place. And sure enough, 12 hours into fight week, I was angry at the UFC's PR machine and Ariel Helwani, and it felt just like Conor McGregor fight week. Look at it go. What the hell do I know?
Jay, is this a blockbuster fight?
It's not, and that's so strange to me, because yes, as I've assailed on Conor McGregor and his allegations of rape, he's coming back. He's been gone since, it's been a few minutes. It's been a while. It's been over 3 years since he's won a fight, period. But anecdotally speaking, the people, non-media personnel that I've discussed fights with in the past didn't know Conor was fighting this week. Like, this is not shouting from the rooftops, the Irishman's back. This is about as low-key of a Conor McGregor pay-per-view as I think you've gotten since Conor McGregor was Conor McGregor, as Ben said. He's fighting Cowboy, a name who even some casuals will be like, oh, yeah, I think I've heard of that guy with the cowboy hat that's called Cowboy. They might not know anything about him, but they brand recognition works to an extent. I don't know if maybe I'm missing that boat, but if it's the general populace just didn't get enough notice, or they're over him, or they're thinking, oh, well, maybe he'll win a fight and then we'll figure it out. Or whatever it is, it just doesn't have that big card feeling. It is a boxing card. This is a boxing style pay-per-view card. Big fight. Big marquee fight. Rodney's right on the money. If this fight's off the card, they scrap the card. They don't wheel it to the gates with Holly Holm versus Raquel Pennington too. The card would be canceled if that fight fell off the card. Big fight. Ex-champion fights somebody. Heavyweight slot fest. Top 10 matchup between two fighters a year or two away from a title shot, and a striker's delight. Like, you can build a formula and see how they put this card together. It's to use something that TJ DeSantis has done many times. How much money would you spend on this card fight by fight? This is not a $70 event. This is a Conor McGregor event and Conor McGregor and friends. You could almost call it that. And that's really too bad
An
because
evening with Conor McGregor.
that's exactly right. That is it. It's a 3-hour it's a 3-hour show in a smaller venue. That's it. And that's kind of too bad.
Yeah, I mean, as far as this being a blockbuster card, like it's a blockbuster card in the same way what was supposed to be UFC 151 was. John Jones versus Dan Henderson, fantastic fight at the time that was made. That would have been a great one to watch. But Jake Ellenberger versus Jay Heron,
Booyah, Kasha.
like this is what the vibe I'm getting here. Like you looking at some of the names on this card, and yeah, I'm always excited to see an Anthony Pettis fight. I'm always excited in some way to see a Holly Holm fight or Andre Feely. There's some guys on this card that definitely spark my interest. But when Alexei Oleinik and Maurice Green is on the pay-per-view, I think we have a problem. I think we have a huge problem. And yeah, let's hope that there are no pipes backstage to slip upon. Let's hope that all urine samples are collected safely. Let's hope that nothing goes wrong, because without this main event, this is total dumpster fire disaster area for an overpriced pay-per-view.
If there's a moment of solace, it's that Donald Cerrone has been fighting. He's got 50 fights now. Has pulled out of exactly one UFC fight when he had a blood infection, a broken arm, and something else. And it was before he fought Robbie Lawler. That was the first time he's ever pulled out of a fight. So we're good on the Cowboy front, unless he gets motorcycled through the midsection again.
Yeah, and Connor also is he makes whatever dates he says as well. So history is backing us on that. But I think also too, I think Cowboy, didn't he like get disemboweled in like a motorcycle accident and he was back fighting?
Still made it to the Jeremy Stevens fight.
Still
won.
beat Jeremy Stevens. I was at that fight. That was nuts. All right. Now let's move on here to swing or miss. Now we talked about the controversy, plenty of controversy to go around in the UFC this week, but let's talk about the fight. Swing or miss, Donald Cerrone is a live dog in his matchup against McGregor. Ben, I'll start with you.
Yeah, he's a live dog. There's value on him at that price. I favor McGregor in the fight. I think the weight class at which it is being contested actually favors Cerrone. McGregor just doesn't look at his best at 170. Whereas at this point in his career, at his age, with the amount of miles that are on the odometer, I like Cerrone at 170. His performances at 170 and 155 over the last 3 or 4 years, a lot of it is due to who's on the other side of the cage against him. But he himself, how he looks and performs physically, I like him better at 170 at 36 or whatever he is right now. He's still a long and rangy guy, and his gas tank and chin are better. So he's a live dog. He definitely has avenues to victory. In fact, if we break it down later, I have the feeling we'll all have kind of similar things to say about what it looks like if Cerrone wins versus what it looks like if McGregor wins. All we're going to differ on is how likely we find those scenarios. So yeah, live dog. And once that McGregor money starts rolling in this week and those odds get like this, even I, who very rarely indulge, might, stake my children's college educations.
So Rodney, I'll pivot to you because Jay, I know we did a show a few weeks back, and I think we all picked who we thought was going to win this fight when it was first announced. I think I was the only person that was picking McGregor at that time. So I have a feeling I know what you're going to say. So let me pivot to Rodney on this one first. Is Donald Cerrone a live dog in your eyes?
That's great odds. And again, I have to throw another plug in here and a shout out to James Lynch, who helped me to break down UFC 246. That video is up on Cageside Press on our YouTube channel. And he actually brought it to my attention that Cerrone is also, at the time, it was plus 550 to win by submission. I really like that. And I'll tell you, whenever you fight in a cage fight, you will spend several weeks with 10,000 different scenarios that play out in your head. Some of them which involve you getting completely embarrassed and getting your face smashed in. Others where you're getting a hand raised in victory. You obviously want to try to gravitate towards those, but the worm of doubt will creep into your head. And on a fight this big, this caliber, being an analyst of this sport and being such a passionate fan, I get so excited. And I kind of have the similar response where I'm getting Bruce Buffer announces these, I get goosebumps. I'll be like, holy shit, I'm on the edge of my seat. This is what I live for, these moments. Every time I think about this fight, I see it playing out two different ways. I could totally see McGregor going in there and just striking him like a cobra and just folding him up like a lawn chair. You like those metaphors? And then I can also see him in round 2 or 3 getting, I could also see him getting rocked by, like a high kick from Cerrone and then submitted. Because we know, to piggyback on Jay's mentioned this word a few times, I love anecdotally. Anecdotally, McGregor's Achilles heel is the submission, right? And people seem to forget Donald Cerrone is an explosive striker, very exciting fighter to watch on the feet, tons of knockouts. But he is a black belt in jiu-jitsu, and his jiu-jitsu translates extremely well to MMA. He's got some sick jiu-jitsu and some sick submissions. Think about his, we talked about Mike Perry at length, and think about the size of Mike Perry and the punching power. And, of course, McGregor has phenomenal punching power at the lower weight classes, not necessarily at 170, historically speaking. So on paper, there's just so many things that point towards Cerrone. But then again, McGregor has made a whole career out of defying logic completely. So I just cannot wrap my head around how this is going to end up. That's why I'm so excited to watch it. But for that money, for plus 250 and then plus 550 by submission, and I think if Cerrone wins, that's how he does it. Hell yeah, you might as well put a little bit of money on that, and it'll be worth your while. And if you don't invest too much, you won't lose that much. But if you win, you'll win a decent little chunk.
All right. Jay, are you run into the to a betting booth this weekend?
There are some odds that I'm glad that Rodney touched on that, because that was when I've been looking at for a while. It's 510 right now, plus 510 for Cerrone by submission. But it's probably going to keep changing as McGregor becomes a greater and greater favorite. All those lines for Cerrone winning will increase, so it could go up. Statistically speaking, Conor McGregor fight week, the odds change. So we'll see how that plays out. Yeah, I think he's a live dog and then some. My analysis of this fight hinged upon what weight class it was going to be at. If it were lightweight, I would have Conor walking through him. He'll do what Justin Gaethje did. He'll hurt him early on and finish him in the first round. At 170, I don't know if he will be able to. I can see the avenues. We can pick. You can close your eyes and picture the way that each guy gets it done. I think that Cerrone can get it done, but he's going to have to go through hell to get there. He's going to have to go through fire. He's going to have to go through probably a tough first round. Now, it's no secret. Everybody talks about this. McGregor's the quick starter. Cerrone's the slow starter. Well, Cerrone's been working on that. He's been getting better at the first round. I had him personally winning the first round against Tony Ferguson by just a narrow margin. But that's not as important because he lost the fight. But the Al Iaquinta fight, he didn't really go into it slow. Al Iaquinta won the round, but he didn't really let it go. I think it isn't going to be a slow, lazy paycheck, Cerrone, although I will say he's getting, $2 million, Cerrone is, which is way more than he's gotten in any other fight. The only guys to put Cerrone away at 170, Darren Till, who's a middleweight now, and Masvidal, who, we know about Jorge Masvidal. I think that Cerrone can survive the onslaught because there's going to be one. Get it done, maybe third round or so. Probably a tap out, but watch out. Yeah, watch out for those head kicks.
Yeah, I still pick McGregor as the winner of this fight. I think Cerrone is. The slow starter thing is true. Of course, less of a problem now, but Conor is such a blitzing starter.
Yeah.
And Cerrone is also very hittable in those moments until he gets warmed up. And even then, he still takes a lot of punishment. So that's kind of what I'm leaning toward. But, man, he's about as live of a dog as you can imagine. It's someone as dangerous as him with so many different ways to win a fight. I would never feel totally comfortable putting money on any fighter. I definitely don't feel comfortable putting money on this fight. But man, if I had $20 I didn't need, well, I might become a Donald Cerrone fan for the night. All right, so now it's time to move on to the speed bag, and this is where I get to flex my authority on you mofos. So you're gonna have 10 seconds to answer the following questions. So let me go ahead and make sure that my screen stays on. We turn this volume up so you can hear the bell. Now, I'm going to start with our special guest, Rodney. If Maycee Barber,
10 seconds?
10 seconds, yep.
Times have changed. It was 30 last time Rodney was on the show.
Yeah.
All right. All right. I'll do my best. All
right, so if Maycee Barber beats Roxanne Modafferi, is she next in line for a flyweight title shot? You have 10 seconds and go.
No, I don't see any situation in which a fight against Roxanne Modafferi is a title eliminator, and also think there's a girl that's a little bit higher up on the division, and Jessica I, who would have something different to say.
All right. Okay, Jay, does Maycee Barber get a title shot if she defeats Roxanne Modafferi?
Well, I think Jessica is still sleeping for the head kick, so I don't know if she has much to say. I think she will, because there's nobody else. There's a dire need for a contender. It's going to be too early.
I was going to let you finish the sentence.
It's going to be too early, and that's too bad. That's what I was going to.
Now, Ben, I won't let finish the sentence. So, Ben, does Maycee Barber get a title shot if she beats Roxanne Modafferi?
I think she will. It's premature and unfortunate for her, but it actually might make sense from a competitive standpoint. There aren't many people in that top 10 that haven't fought her already.
All right. Okay, so I'll start with you on this one, Jay. Win or lose this weekend, will Anthony Pettis follow his brother Sergio to Bellator when his contract expires, and go?
I don't want to steal anybody's thunder, but Pettis has a grievance with the UFC lately. He's not happy with anyone there. I think he's on his way out, and he'll be fighting Ben Henderson next year.
Didn't even think about that possibility. All right.
Again.
So,
oh yeah.
I do. All right, Ben, you're up. So, does Anthony Pettis follow Sergio to Bellator when his contract expires?
I wish I could answer this after Sergio's first fight, but based on a wild guess, I kind of agree with Jay. I think he's on his way out of the UFC and probably to Bellator.
All right. Rodney, Anthony Pettis to Bellator. Does that happen?
If I'm his manager, I think that's a good move. I definitely, win or lose. If he loses, I don't think he's done fighting. I'm not sure if he goes to Bellator, but I think that's the right move if he does.
All right. Okay, and final question. I'll start with you on this one, Ben. If McGregor loses this weekend, does he retire?
Unless he's badly injured or truly humiliated, no. I mean, if he can make 8 figures, even for phoning it in, why wouldn't he do it again?
All right. Jay, you're up. Does McGregor retire if he loses this weekend?
I was going to say yes, but Duffy reminded me he's making $80 million. No, probably not.
All right. And Rodney, last up. Does Conor McGregor retire with a loss this weekend?
Yes, just a few years ago, right after he got off of welfare, he told us he was going to be a double champion. And then he said he was going to fight Floyd Mayweather. Nobody believed him. He did those things. Guess what? This is not a movie. Comeback stories don't happen in real life. I think he loses. I think he's done.
Oh, eloquent.
Nice.
All right. So now let me go ahead and switch the clock because I have 30 seconds to answer all the questions. So take a deep breath and I'll start the clock after reading the first question. If Maycee Barber beats Roxanne Modafferi, is she next in line for a flyweight title shot? Yeah, she might as well be. It's a very thin division. Maycee Barber hits all the promotional markers, so it sounds like they would fast track her. And Jessica I, to Jay's credit, she still hasn't woken up. Now, win or lose, Pettis. I think he does go to Bellator. So many marquee matchups there. Tell me you wouldn't see Pettis versus Chandler. I love it. And Conor McGregor, if he loses this weekend, he probably will retire unless he's still a draw. And I think it depends on how the fight goes. If he makes a good showing, he'll come back. Woo. Man, that was goddamn. Let me a little dirt on my shoulder. Let me brush that off right quick there, player.
Do you actually wake up to that sound in the morning?
No, I work out to that. That's
God,
yeah. My actually I gotta change the tone of my alarm clock now because it's too nice. So I'll sleep right through it and it'll be like in my dreams and stuff. So I gotta make it more annoying.
Gotta change it to crying newborn.
Yeah, that alarm clock works very well in my house. All right,
or you could change it to the one you can hear in my background, which is begging the toddlers that are trying to beat down the door to my studio.
It's just a glimpse into my future. So
yeah.
All right. So I mean, we did kind of talk about this already, but let's go ahead and put a bow on it. So we all kind of agree that UFC 246 is not the best of cards overall, but we all alluded to there were some things that were worth highlighting. Let's each have one fight outside of the main event that deserves a little bit of shine. So Rodney, I'll start with you.
Okay, I talked about it a little bit earlier, boys. And listen, I was blessed to cover all 10 weeks of Dana White's Contender Series. Contender Series now, season 3 here in Las Vegas at the new UFC Apex. If y'all are ever in town during the summer next year, I promise you, make it a point to make a trip out here to at least cover one of those. It's so much fun. You have so much access. It's a great experience. So, and that being said, there's a ton of guys and gals that came through that are just super exciting. For me, it's hard because there's a bunch of them on this card. But for me, I talked about them already, and this is my last plug for Cageside Press. Go to cagesidepress.com or on our YouTube channel. Check out my exclusive interview with Odie Osborne. He's a Jamaican scrapper. Just an awesome dude, a bantamweight fighter. Had an amazing finish to get a UFC contract on Contender Series this summer. And he's making his official debut against Brian Boom Boom Kelleher, who's not a guy who's, he's had some ups and downs, but he's also a wily veteran. So, I mean, they take these guys, in my opinion, and they throw them right in the deep end. They don't put them against other contenders. They throw them against experienced, established names.
All right, good pick right there, Jay. Give me one fight on this card that you're particularly looking forward to.
So, I ran down the list and I saw the one that just kind of glowed for me. Tim Elliott, Askar Askarov. I see that fight playing out how it did when Tim Elliott fought Louis Smolka. Just a crazy ground battle, scrambles and passes, exchanges, and just madness. I can see that playing out. And at the end of the fight, we're going to all look around and go, why the hell do they want to cut flyweight again? It's going to be that same repeating motif. I think that's my fight.
All right.
Sorry, I lied. One more plug. Go to cagesidepress.com or the Cageside YouTube and check out my exclusive interview with Tim Elliott. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Plug away, man. Ben, what's one fight on this card that you're really looking forward to?
No. I refuse. I'm giving you 2 fights.
Just don't take the one I'm thinking of, and then we're all good.
First, give me Claudia Gadelha versus Alexa Grasso. Is that one of yours? Is that yours? No. Okay, good. It's interesting because these 2 women are, in roughly the same place in terms of their recent record. They've both been kind of trading off wins and losses for the last 6 or 8 fights. Even so, the perception is completely different because it feels like Gadelha is on her way down, falling from being one of the top 2 or 3 women in the sport forever, whereas Grasso's on her way up. She came up out of Invicta, plucked probably a little too early, and is still struggling to make good on that promise. But I love the fight because it's a fight where we're going to learn a lot about where one or both of them really fit in the division going forward. Is Gadelha going to make one more run at the title now that there's someone else at the top that maybe she can give a different look to? Or is she just going to settle into being kind of the Jim Miller of strawweight? The woman who was the 2 or 3 best forever. Is Grasso finally going to, again, make good on all that promise? I was looking at their records just while we were talking tonight, and I was shocked that Grasso's now 26 because it just felt like she's been 20 forever. But she's actually someone who's, if she loses, she's entering that Eric Silva territory of the perpetual prospect who's going to turn it around at any moment. So it's a great style matchup. It's a great matchup in terms of narrative and where the two women are in the division. Give me that fight. And then, Anthony Pettis versus Diego Ferreira, a tale of two lightweight careers, because they are the two different kind of story you can have in the UFC. Anthony Pettis is the story of the guy who inserted himself into our consciousness to such a level that no matter how many fights he loses, all he has to do is win 1 or 2 spectacularly, and he's right back in our consciousness. Like the ultimate example, if he came back tomorrow, how many spectacular wins does Cain Velasquez need before all the true believers are back, including myself, calling for him to take on the current champ, whoever he is? 1. That's kind of where Anthony Pettis is to me, to a lesser extent. Then Diego Ferreira, is on the other side of that. He's the, what do you have to do in the UFC lightweight or welterweight division to get a goddamn title shot? Welterweight's lousy with them. How many guys were there in the UFC welterweight division this time last year that were on 5, 6, or 7 fight winning streaks and weren't even in the top 10 yet? And Ferreira is that guy for the lightweight division. He's on a 5 fight winning streak. I'm slightly biased towards him just because I see him around. He's a Texas guy. I don't know. Actually, that's not true. I do know why you leave Brazil and you move to the Rio Grande Valley, because I asked him and he said the weather reminded him of Manaus. So having been down there, I can't argue that. But he's a guy, just quiet, good-humored, good guy. And he is the walking embodiment of what do you need to do to like shoulder your way to the front of the line in the UFC if you're not willing to be kind of a loudmouth. Because he's winning convincingly, he's beating good guys. So one person's narrative, one person's story is going to take a step forward this weekend. I'm a fan of both fighters. I want to see both of them do well. And 2 men leave the octagon, or 2 men enter the octagon, and 2 paths diverge 2 different ways afterwards, and that's kind of my favorite kind of fight. So those are my 2, and I'm sorry that I went over, but
just
too much good stuff.
Too much disrespect, just ridiculous. I'm shocked, appalled, and offended. Now, my one pick, I simply did want to tell a joke about Kelvin Gastelum dropping to 155 to take on Drew Dober, but instead I'm going to highlight Andre Fili versus Sadiq Youssef. Such a great style matchup. That's such a pivotal fight for the featherweight division. And for Sadiq Youssef, it represents a major opportunity to really do damage in the division. So just looking at Andre Fili's last couple of losses, he's kind of been the guy that the UFC puts you up against if they have big expectations for you at featherweight. So Michael Johnson, we already knew the story with him getting that split decision win over him about a year and a half ago or so. But before that, Calvin Kattar, we know how his career trajectory has gone up until recently. Kattar looking like a serious featherweight title contender, and then Yair Rodriguez with his spectacular flying kick to knock out Fili. So if Sadiq Youssef can pull off a win over Andre Fili, that means sky's the limit for him at featherweight. So this is a very big deal for Youssef, who also happens to be a DMV native. So that's what's up. Now, let's go on to the buried treasure. This is where we highlight an MMA story that should have received greater coverage, in our opinion. So, Rodney, I'll start with you. What is your buried treasure this week?
Yeah, so this one is more of a buried turd than a treasure, but and I'll just gloss over it because I talked about it in depth earlier, and of course, I'm just gonna keep lying to y'all. It's another plug. I told you I wrote a story about this because I felt like it needed to be done, and it's the Mike Perry thing. It's the Mike Perry thing. We talked about it in the MMA media. But I really do. I just feel like that's something that should have gotten more attention. And I wonder if, especially based on hearing some of the comments that you guys had to follow up with what I said about it, I almost wonder if the UFC is kind of just hoping it'll just go away. And they think, hey, if we come out and make an apology or we do some kind of punitive damage, then more people in the mainstream are going to notice, because right now, the only mainstream outlet that's actually reported outside of MMA media is The Source, which is, pretty decent sized outlet in entertainment, right? So but it didn't quite go viral. So since it didn't hit that viral status, there's a possibility it could just disappear altogether. And, I just feel like we haven't talked about it enough. And I certainly have, but I would like that conversation to lead to some type of a change, some type of action of sorts. So that's it for me.
All right. Definitely. I'm sure we'll revisit this topic soon enough, because somebody going to do the dumb shit again.
His name's Mike Perry.
yeah. Hit your stopwatch. It's time to start waiting for it to happen again. Jay, please share with us your buried treasure for the week.
So I'll get a little more fun and fancy free. Donald Cerrone, harking back to 246, is embracing his acting chops more and more. He's joining Mark Wahlberg and Winston Duke, who you know as M'Baku from Black Panther and the Avengers movies. It's a Netflix, I think it's Netflix, mystery thriller movie called Spencer Confidential. And it's going to be an ex-cop in Wahlberg teaming up with an MMA fighter with a questionable past, which is Winston Duke, to solve a murder or murders. Cerrone's going to be joining the cast. I'm assuming if Duke's an aspiring MMA fighter with a past that we're shrouded in mystery, I'm sure he's going to be featured as a cage fighter. But okay, I'm good. I'm always glad when fighters expand. He'll be adding to his work where he was in the TV show Justified, where you saw him and his tattoo and he got knocked out in a fight. And then he also was in It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. He and Paul Felder partook in an episode about fight milk and sponsorships and drug testing and USADA related issues. And he was also in the sequel to Equalizer. This is IMDb, so I don't know these things off the top of my head, but I'm always glad to see fighters explore other opportunities outside the cage.
I was there at the they filmed the part of that Is Always Sunny in Philadelphia episode around UFC 199. So at the weigh-ins, they filmed the stare down with him and Cub Swanson. So I was there for that. That was pretty funny.
Cerrone was in Godless on Netflix with Jeff Daniels. I don't know if you saw this, a miniseries. Phenomenal. And Keith Jardine actually had a pretty decent role, a speaking role in that, and he was excellent, man. Keith Jardine is he's almost transitioned completely into stunt work and acting. So it was nice to see him, resurface.
Yeah, Keith Jardine, if you keep your eyes peeled, Keith Jardine can be seen getting beat up by all sorts of superheroes and stuff. I know the Punisher gave him hands in the Netflix series. Yeah.
Tate Fletcher also is one of those guys who does that too. Tate Fletcher's getting his ass kicked by everybody these days.
And Jay Heron has had his.
Oh man, he's in like all of the Netflix Marvels, I think, isn't he?
Yeah, Daredevil gave him the business. Yeah, I think the Punisher gave him the business too. I think Luke Cage gave him the business. Yeah. Jay Heron, he been getting served up on Netflix. And then
interesting fact, I did a pilot with Tony Todd, the guy you remember, Candyman back in the day. Sure. Mm-hmm. I had a speaking role. I was in a scene with Tony Todd and Jay Heron and Mike Pyle's acting coach. I don't remember his name, but their acting coach is actually an actor as well. And man, that was last year, and hopefully that will be released one of these days. But yeah, I actually did that.
Man, you snuck a plug in that too. That's what's up, man.
I know. I did on accident.
And also too, Winston Duke is going to be playing Kimbo Slice in a biopic. If
Really?
I'm not mistaken. Yeah, he's supposed to be cast to play Kimbo. All right, so my buried treasure this week is we made a couple jokes about it, but we didn't really tell the full story, and that is Anthony Pettis plans on suing USADA because he was injured during the collection of a urine sample. Now, while I took the immature route and said that I too have been injured urinating, and that's because I hurt my lower back with the heavy lifting, Anthony Pettis cut his hand while like screwing the top off the bottle, and apparently the hand had to be super glued back. This was like behind the scenes at UFC 241. He super glued the cut on his hand and then proceeded to lose a decision to Nate Diaz. So yeah, he's suing USADA. So I mean, peeing is a very dangerous thing. So that will do it for this edition of Unleashed. We want to thank Rodney for joining the panel. Always a pleasure speaking to you, man, and I can't wait to bring you back on. Now, I have a good feeling that anyone who's watched this show knows what website to go to check out some of your content and some of the things you have posted up, but where can the good folks find you?
MMA Soldier.net, of course, is my website, but I work for Cageside Press at the moment, and I got to say, love those guys, love the team, love Jay for bringing me on, and I'm just having a blast covering fights, interviewing fighters, writing for those guys. So that's where most of my energy is focused right now. You can find me on Instagram at Rodney James Edgar, and I'm on Twitter at Rodney James 138, spewing venom 24/7. And cheers, boys. Thank y'all so much, man. I got these wild children trying to break down my door. I need to get over here and see what's going on before my wife kills me, man. But thank you again, man. You guys are awesome. I appreciate it.
Thanks, brother, man. Good luck to you.
Go ahead and pull the ripcord, man. We got you.
All right. If that one don't open, man, then I got a reserve by my side here, man. I'll see y'all soon. I'll see you real soon, okay?
All right, see you,
Thank
brother.
you.
Take care.
All right, Ben. Where can the good folks find you?
Well, my name is Ben Duffy. You can find me on Twitter at Benjamin Duffy. You can find me on Instagram at Benjamin Duffy if you like pictures of food and children. And you can find my articles at suredog.com.
All right. And Jay, same question. Where can the good folks find you?
I am also at suredog.com. You can find some of my interesting work coming out for UFC 246. I'm on the play-by-play. I'm on the betting odds. I'm on the post-event analysis. I'll be covering 246 everywhere you need me to be.
All right, cool. And of course, I'm Ant Walker. My Twitter handle is Ant Walker MMA. Go ahead, follow that for all my sarcasm and witty remarks. I am a high-level fan who has fun time here on the Walkout Network, so check it out. Got some more content coming for the Walkout Network very shortly. I think you guys will be pleasantly surprised about some of the things we've got in store. But you know what you got to do. You must stay beautiful. You must stay positive. And through it all, you've got to stay sexy. I will see you when I see you. Peace.